The car was already waiting, black sedan, engine running, a man in a dark jacket standing beside the rear door with one hand on the handle, patient as something that had been planned for a long time. The driveway was 40 feet of polished stone. The morning was cold and clean, everything exactly as it should be. He walked toward the car the way he walked toward everything. Certain, unhurried, a man who had built an empire by knowing exactly where he was going. He was 30 feet away when she stepped out. No warning, no hesitation. Just a woman in work clothes blocking his path on his own driveway, holding out an old phone with a cracked screen, looking at him with the eyes of someone who had been awake all night deciding whether to do this. She said 3 words. He stopped. And somewhere at the far end of that driveway, the man beside the car began to wait in a different way. Barrett Hale did not own a single thing he had not built himself. Not the company, not the house, not the reputation that made men twice his age pick up the phone on the first ring when they saw his name on the screen. He had started with a borrowed truck and a route nobody else wanted, hauling freight between 3 small towns in Pennsylvania that the bigger carriers had stopped servicing because the margins were too thin. He drove those routes himself for 2 years, learned them the way you learn a scar, by feel, by memory, by knowing exactly where it hurt. That was 20 years ago. Now he had 400 trucks, 11 regional hubs, and a company that moved more freight along the eastern seaboard than most people knew existed. He employed over 2,000 people. He had never once missed a payroll. Not during the 2008 collapse, not during the pandemic. Not during the year his marriage ended and he spent 4 months running on 5 hours of sleep and black coffee, and the stubborn refusal to let anything he had built fall apart. He was good at not letting things fall apart. He was considerably less good at noticing when they already had. Monday morning, early October, the air outside had that specific bite that the Northeast saved for the first real week of fall, the kind of cold that didn't ask permission. Barrett came downstairs at 8:15 in a dark charcoal suit, briefcase in his right hand, phone in his left, his mind already running through the opening 20 minutes of the Denton meeting. The Denton acquisition had been 18 months in the making. A regional carrier with outdated infrastructure and outstanding route coverage across 3 states he had been trying to break into for years. Today was the day they would either shake hands or walk away. He was not planning to walk away. The house was quiet. It was always quiet now. 3 years since the divorce and he still hadn't adjusted to the way sound moved differently in a house with only one person in it. Everything echoed slightly more than it should. Coffee cups, footsteps. The front door closing behind him in the morning. He did not linger over it. He never did. The path from the front door to the main gate was about 40 feet of polished stone, flanked on one side by a low hedge his landscaper kept precisely trimmed and on the other by the wide stretch of lawn that he occasionally noticed and never used. At the end of the path, just past the gate, his car was waiting. Black sedan, same as always. Engine running. Owen Taft standing beside the rear door with one hand resting on the handle. Everything exactly as it should be. Barrett was halfway down the path when she stepped out from the side gate, Sloan Merritt. She had worked in the house for 2 years. She managed the household with a thoroughness that Barrett had noticed exactly twice. Once, when a pipe burst in the east wing and everything was fixed before he came home. And once when he realized he had been eating the same breakfast every Monday for 14 months and it was always right. Hot, on time. Without him ever once having asked for it. He did not know the name of her daughter. He was not sure he had ever asked. She was wearing her work clothes, dark slacks, a gray top, hair pulled back. She was not running, not crying, not doing any of the things a person does when they are frightened. She stepped directly into his path and said 3 words, "Don't take that car." Barrett stopped. Not because the words were loud. They weren't. Not because there was panic underneath them. There wasn't. He stopped because of something in the delivery. Something flat and certain and completely without performance. The voice of someone who had been awake all night deciding whether to say this, and had finally decided. He looked at her. He looked past her at the car at the gate. Owen standing there. Or the man he had assumed was Owen, Ms. Merritt. He kept his voice level. "I have a meeting in Denton at 10, I know," she said. "Then whatever this is, please, 1 word." The way she said it was not desperate. It was careful. 2 minutes. "Before you get in that car. Just 2 minutes." He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his chest. Slightly. The way a compass shifts when it gets close to something it wasn't expecting. 2 minutes, he said. She led him back along the side of the house, away from the sight line of the gate. Around the corner where the tall boxwood hedge cut off the view completely, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. Old model. Cracked along one corner, held together with a strip of clear tape along the edge. Last night, she said. I was finishing late in the storage room off the library. The door was mostly closed. I heard voices in the library. She paused. I didn't mean to record it. Another pause. That's not true. I meant to. Because I got scared and I didn't know what else to do. She pressed play. The first sound was ambient. A room settling, then a door. Then Celeste's voice. Barrett had not heard Celeste's voice in 6 weeks. He had thought he was glad about that. He understood now, hearing it come out of a cracked phone speaker in the cold morning air, that he had simply gotten used to its absence. Those were different things. Her voice was warm, the way it always was in social situations. That smooth, unhurried cadence she used at dinner parties and every conversation where she wanted something. Has to look right from the beginning. He always checks his phone on the way to the car. He doesn't look up until he's inside. Then a man's voice. Lower, unhurried differently, not warm, precise. The window is 8:30. He's consistent. I've confirmed it twice this week. Once he's in the car, the route takes the bypass. The bypass goes north along Route 9. There's a stretch past the Keller Lake turnoff where the guardrail is old, hasn't been maintained in 3 years. The water there is deep. Current goes toward the north inlet. A pause, the insurance, Celeste said. Already confirmed. The adjustment you had processed 16 months ago holds. Accidental death triggers the double clause. That brings the payout to $48 million. With the share clause in the separation agreement, the company's stake transfers to you automatically upon his death. Before the final sign-off, another pause. Longer, by tomorrow night, Celeste said it will be done. Sloan stopped the recording. The hedge stood still around them. A bird moved through the far edge of the lawn. The engine at the gate hummed softly in the distance. Barrett did not speak for a long moment. He was running numbers. Not the kind with dollar signs, the other kind. The kind a man runs when he is trying to figure out how much of what he thought was real actually was. 48 million. He had adjusted a life insurance policy. He remembered that, vaguely, 14 or 15 months ago. Someone from the financial management team had flagged it as part of a broader asset review. He had signed things. He signed a lot of things. He trusted the people around him to tell him when something needed his full attention. The final separation agreement. He thought about the 3 times he had postponed the last signing. November because the Denton deal was heating up. January because of the Chicago acquisition falling through. March because there had seemed to be no urgency and his calendar was already full. He had not thought about urgency. How long have you been awake? He asked. Sloan blinked. The question surprised her. All night. Why didn't you go to the police? She held his gaze. I thought about it. But I don't have anything except a recording I made alone in a room I was supposed to have left an hour earlier. I don't know what that counts for legally. She stopped. Started again. And I thought, if I'm wrong, I've destroyed something that can't be fixed with one phone call from the person who cleans your house. And if I was right, she let that end there. If she was right, he was standing 40 feet from his own death. If you were right, he said quietly. The right person to tell was me. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Barrett turned and looked back toward the gate. The car was still there. The man standing beside it had not moved. Same dark jacket as Owen, same build, same height, same posture, except Owen Taft had worked for him for 10 years. He was 52 years old, with the hands of a man who had done physical work his whole life before becoming a driver. He wore a silver ring on his left thumb, had worn it every single day Barrett had known him. A gift from his father, who had died the year Owen started. Owen had told him the story once on a long drive to a conference in Connecticut. Barrett had remembered it the way he remembered all things that mattered. Filed it, not in a drawer, in the part of his mind reserved for what was real. The man at the gate was not wearing a ring. Barrett looked once more at the left thumb. Clean. Bare, there it was. He took out his phone and called Celeste. She picked up on the second ring. Barrett, where are you? The driver's been waiting for. I forgot a folder. His voice came out completely ordinary. The board had mentioned it once in a performance review. The way he could deliver difficult information in the same tone as a weather forecast. I came back inside. I'm in the study. Oh, a beat, just long enough to mean something. Do you need me to help you find it? No, I know where it is, out in 2 minutes. Okay, hurry. You know how traffic gets on the bypass. There was warmth in her voice. He had believed in that warmth for 11 years. Standing behind a hedge on the side of his own house, he understood in one clean, quiet moment that it had never been warm at all. I know, he said. I'll be quick. He ended the call. He looked at Sloane. She had watched him through every second of it without moving. She doesn't know you're here, he said. No, good, he thought for a moment. I need you to go back inside, through the kitchen. If she asks, you were in the laundry room this morning. You haven't seen me since I came downstairs. Okay, don't vary from that. Don't offer anything extra. Just your normal morning. Sloane nodded. He could see she understood completely, which meant she was either very good at reading situations or she had been thinking through exactly this kind of thing since she was lying awake at 3 in the morning deciding what to do. Probably both. Mr. Hale, she stopped. My daughter is in the house. She's in the back bedroom. She comes down for breakfast at 8:45. He had not known that, had not known the daughter was there on weekday mornings, had never asked. She won't be involved in any of this, he said. I promise you that. The words came out before he calculated them. Unusual for him, he was almost always calculating. Sloane held his gaze for one more second. Then she turned and walked back along the side of the house toward the kitchen entrance. Quiet footsteps, steady pace, no looking back. He watched her go, then he took out his phone again and tapped a name from his contacts. Walter Greer picked up on the first ring. You should be in the car already, Walter. Barrett kept his voice low and exact. The voice he used when the number on a spreadsheet was very bad and he needed everyone in the room to stay functional. I need you to listen and not ask questions yet. I need everything on my life insurance policy. Every adjustment in the last 2 years. Every change to beneficiary language. Every signature. I need it in 90 minutes. A pause. Walter Greer had been his attorney for 20 years and had heard this voice exactly twice before. Once during a hostile takeover attempt in 2016, and once the night Barrett's divorce lawyer called at 11 p.m. to say Celeste had retained separate counsel. Talk to me, Walter said. Documents first. 90 minutes, a shorter pause. I'll have them. Where will you be? Moving, I'll call when I'm settled. He ended the call. Stood behind the boxwood hedge on the side of his own property in a dark suit, with a briefcase in his hand, and a car idling 40 feet away with a man in it, who had been sent to make sure he did not come home from Denton. He thought about Celeste's voice on the recording. By tomorrow night it will be done. 11 years. He had come home to that voice. Trusted it in rooms full of people who wanted things from him. Believed it was one of the few constants he could count on. 3 postponements on a piece of paper. He had thought they were about timing. He had not thought about what the delay cost. He moved along the back of the house, staying close to the wall, through the side door into the service corridor. He went to the study first. Opened a drawer, picked up the folder that had been sitting on his desk since March. He spent 30 seconds there, turning on a lamp, leaving a drawer open, setting a physical record of a man who had come back inside for something. Then he walked to the front foyer. Celeste was already there. She had come in from somewhere, the garden, possibly. She was wearing a cream blouse and dark trousers, hair down, which she only wore like that when she wasn't planning to leave the house. She was standing by the long mirror adjusting an earring and turned when she heard his footsteps. There you are, warm smile, complete. Not a crack in it. Did you find it? He held up the folder. It was on the desk where I left it. Good. She tilted her head slightly, the way she did when she was being fond. Now go. The driver's been waiting almost 20 minutes. He crossed the foyer toward her, stopped close enough that this looked like what a departure looked like. A man leaving for work, a morning routine, 20 seconds of ordinary that resembled every other morning. He kissed her on the cheek, just below the ear. He breathed in the perfume he had bought her every Christmas for 9 years, and thought, in the clean and distant part of his mind, that was already 3 steps ahead of everything else. That a person could know every surface detail of another person and still know nothing about them at all. I'll call you from Denton, he said. Drive safe. She squeezed his arm once. Come home early if you can, he smiled. The small, private smile that had always been just for her and that now meant something else entirely. Then he turned and walked out the front door, down the steps, onto the path, Phone out, eyes down. He walked toward the car. He counted his paces, 40 feet. A man on his way to work, scrolling through an email he was not reading, not varying his pace, not raising his head, 20 feet. The man at the gate had straightened the moment the door opened. Now, standing beside the rear door, one hand on the handle, waiting for the next step in a plan that had been rehearsed and confirmed and set into motion. 15 feet, Barrett shifted direction, not dramatically, not a turn, a drift, about 12 degrees to the right. Just enough to redirect his path from the car door toward the narrow pedestrian gate on the far side of the driveway. The man at the gate hesitated. Barrett felt it without looking, Mr. Hale. The voice was even, practiced. Barrett raised the phone toward his ear. Yes, I'm heading out now. I'll meet you, at the corner. Driveway's blocked, he said it to no one. Said it clearly enough for anyone watching to register it as ordinary. He pushed open the pedestrian gate with one hand and stepped out onto the sidewalk. He did not look back. 20 steps. A turn at the corner. Owen's silver sedan was idling at the curb exactly where Barrett had told him to wait. He had called Owen from the service corridor 3 minutes earlier. 1 minute of explanation. Owen had listened without interrupting and said only, I'm 10 minutes out. I'll be there. 10 years together had a way of making certain conversations very short. Barrett opened the passenger door and got in the front seat. Not the back. Owen pulled away before the door was fully closed. They drove 2 blocks before either of them spoke. The city moved past the windows at the pace of an ordinary Monday morning. A woman walking a dog, a delivery truck backing into a loading dock, a man unlocking the door of a diner and flipping the sign from closed to open. None of it knew what had almost happened 3 blocks back. Owen, Barrett said, Sir, last week. The message about your car being in for service, taking paid leave while the company used a different provider. Yes, sir. Who sent it? Owen was quiet for a moment. Text message. Came from the company dispatch line. Same format as always. I figured you'd switched providers again. It happens sometimes. A pause. Did I make a mistake? No, Barrett said. You had no reason to question it. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to make it look right. Owen's hands tightened on the wheel. Just slightly. Where are we going? He said. Coffee shop on Mercer Street. Green awning, parking in the back. Walter is meeting us there. They drove the rest of the way without talking. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Walter Greer was already at the corner table when they walked in. 2 coffees, a leather folder. The same plain dark suit he wore to everything regardless of what it cost. He stood when Barrett came through the door and they shook hands the way men do who have known each other through enough to skip the rest of it. Owen took a position near the door, back to the room. Eyes on the street, Barrett sat down. Walter slid one of the coffees across. Talk, Barrett talked. He used the same flat, efficient voice he used when reporting losses to the board. He left nothing out. The recording, the route, Keller Lake, the unsigned separation agreement, the man at the gate without the ring, the 12-degree redirect on the driveway. All of it. 15 minutes without stopping. Walter did not interrupt once. He wrote nothing down. He missed nothing. When Barrett finished, Walter opened the leather folder and laid 3 pages on the table. Your policy was issued 12 years ago. Original coverage 11 million, standard for a principal at your stage. First adjustment 8 years ago after the IPO, coverage raised to 18 million. I was in the room for that signing. He tapped the 3rd page. Second adjustment 16 months ago. Coverage raised to 24 million. An accidental death rider was added, which doubles the payout under qualifying circumstances to 48. Beneficiary clause was restructured. All conditional language removed. Celeste is named sole beneficiary with no contestable provisions. Barrett looked at his own signature at the bottom of the page. He recognized the slight lean to the right. The way the second letter of his last name always pulled a fraction longer than it should. I don't remember this, he said. I expected that, Walter said. The signing was witnessed by a notary in Westerfield. I made calls this morning. The notary retired abruptly 4 months ago and relocated to Idaho. His office number is disconnected. Personal number goes to voicemail. Barrett set the page down carefully. Celeste was in Westerfield 16 months ago, he said. The Granger Foundation dinner. She came home and showed me photographs of the venue. And the day before the dinner, Walter said, according to the notary's log, you signed this document, I checked your calendar. You were in meetings in the city all day, the coffee shop moved around them. Someone laughed at the counter, a spoon rang against a cup. A door opened and let in a cold breath and closed again. "She's been planning this for at least 16 months, Barrett said. "At least," Walter said, "and the man on the recording, that's what I need time to work on." Walter closed the folder. "I have someone. She's been doing investigative work for my firm for 15 years. Name is Dina Farlow. Careful, thorough, fast. I called her before I left the house this morning. How long? By tonight?" "Possibly sooner." Barrett looked down at the untouched coffee in front of him. He picked it up and drank half of it in one pull. It was good. The kind that had been made by someone who cared about the process. "Walter," he said. "Yes, there's a woman at the house. Sloane Merritt. She's the one who brought me the recording. She has a daughter, 8 years old. They're both inside the house right now." Walter was already picking up his phone. "Someone on the property within the hour," he said. "Unmarked. They won't interfere with anything. Won't be seen. They can't know they're being watched. They won't." Walter was already dialing. Barrett nodded. He set the coffee cup down. He looked out the window at Owen standing at the door, watching the street with the patient, unhurried attention of a man who had spent a decade moving one person safely between places and understood that job as something worth taking seriously. He thought about the silver ring on Owen's left thumb. He thought about the man at the gate with bare hands. He thought about Celeste saying, "By tomorrow night it will be done." He had 40 trucks running routes right now, 11 hubs processing freight, 2,000 people drawing paychecks he had made sure would always be there. He had built all of that from a borrowed truck and a route no one else wanted. He knew how to work a problem. He knew how to stay inside a situation when everything was moving. How to keep his hands steady when the numbers on the screen were very bad. How to make the next correct decision without needing the full picture yet. He had been doing it for 20 years. He picked up his phone and started. There was one more thing to do before Walter's call ended. Barrett asked him to arrange a small hotel. Nothing connected to his name or his accounts. Cash payment, 4th floor if possible. A window facing anywhere but the street. Walter had it arranged within 20 minutes. But before the hotel, Barrett needed to go back to the house one more time. Not for anything he had forgotten. For something he needed to see. Owen drove him around the block and stopped at the service entrance on the east side, a narrow lane used by the landscaper and the grocery delivery service, and no one else on a Monday morning. Barrett walked in through the side garden, through the low gate in the inner hedge, and came up along the south wall of the house. He stopped at the corner. Through a gap in the climbing jasmine that covered the south trellis, he could see the back patio. The white iron table, the chairs, the stretch of lawn leading down to the garden shed. Celeste was there. She was not alone. The man sitting across from her was the man whose voice had been on the recording. Barrett knew it before he could explain how. The certainty arrived the way certain knowledge does. Fully, without steps. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, lean, well kept in the way of someone who spent more time on their appearance than they admitted. Dark jacket over a collared shirt. Hands resting on the table near hers. Not touching. Close enough that anyone watching understood the distance was a choice. Celeste was smiling. She was wearing the light blue dress she had brought back from a shopping trip the previous spring, and told him she was saving for something special. He had not asked what. The man said something Barrett could not hear. Celeste laughed softly and reached across the table and laid her hand over his. "By tonight," she said. The words carried across the morning air with the lightness of someone describing dinner plans. "This will all be over." Barrett did not move. He did not feel rage. He had expected rage and it had not come. What arrived instead was something stranger. Something like watching a long-held belief finally finish the work of becoming untrue. Slow, complete, without drama. The man lifted her hand and pressed his lips briefly to the inside of her wrist. Barrett turned away. He walked back along the south wall, through the inner gate, down the service lane to where Owen was waiting. He got in the car. "Drive," he said. Owen drove 3 blocks from the house. Barrett said, "Mercer Street. The coffee shop. You already said goodbye to Walter. I need 5 more minutes with him." Owen did not ask why. He turned the car and drove to Mercer Street, and Barrett went back inside and sat down across from Walter, who looked at him and waited. "I needed to see it myself," Barrett said, and he was there, on the back patio. With her, he set both hands flat on the table. "Now I know." Walter studied him for a moment. "How do you feel?" Barrett considered the question as honestly as he was capable of. Like a floor I'd been standing on for 11 years just became something else, he said. I haven't figured out what yet, Walter nodded. He did not offer comfort, which was one of the things Barrett had always valued about him. He offered something better. Then we get to work, Walter said. Barrett picked up his coffee. Yes, he said. We do. He sat in that corner booth on Mercer Street for another 40 minutes. He answered 2 calls from his operations director about the rescheduled Denton meeting, and handled both without anything in his voice, suggesting his morning had been anything other than ordinary. He texted his assistant to clear his afternoon. He reviewed 3 documents Walter had pulled on his phone, and then he took the coffee that had gone cold, finished it anyway, stood up, and walked out to where Owen was waiting to drive him to a hotel he had never been to, in a part of the city he barely knew, where he would spend the night working on a plan to stay alive. The city did not notice. That was the thing about cities. They kept going regardless. The hardware store opened. The diner filled up. The delivery driver finished his route and went home. All of it continuing in the ordinary rhythm of a day that didn't know and wouldn't have cared that a man had almost stepped into the last car he would ever ride in, on a driveway 40 feet from his own front door, 45 minutes earlier. Barrett got into the back of Owen's car. The door closed and he got to work. The hotel room was on the 4th floor, small, clean, the kind of place that existed to be slept in and left without ceremony. A bed with a white coverlet, a desk with a lamp that buzzed slightly when you first switched it on. A window that faced the parking lot. A painting of a sailboat above the headboard that no one had ever looked at long enough to have an opinion about. Barrett sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it anyway. He had stayed in rooms like this when he was 23. Hauling freight between towns that didn't have hotels worth naming, sleeping 4 hours and getting back on the road before dawn. He remembered thinking then that one day he would stay somewhere better. He had. For a long time he had. He did not mind this room. That surprised him slightly. His phone was on the nightstand, briefcase on the floor by the desk. Jacket folded over the back of the chair because he had learned early that a man who lets his clothes wrinkle is a man who has stopped paying attention to details. And right now every detail mattered. He stood, walked to the window, looked down. A white delivery van idling near the back entrance. A woman loading grocery bags into a small sedan, moving quickly because the cold had gotten sharper in the last hour. A man in a brown uniform checking something on a clipboard, then checking it again. All of them inside their own ordinary Monday. None of them knew. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Walter. 3 words, Denner has something then, 10 seconds later. Calling in 5, Barrett turned from the window. He picked up the phone and sat back down on the edge of the bed. 4 minutes and 50 seconds later it rang. Walter's voice came first. Barrett. Dina is on the line, let her go. Questions after, then a different voice. Low, unhurried. The voice of someone who had spent a long time in rooms where information was currency and had learned precisely how much of it to spend at once. Mr. Hale. My name is Dina Farlow. I'll be direct, please, Barrett said. The man with your ex-wife. The man on the recording, he has been introducing himself as Preston Aldrich. That is not his name. A pause. Measured, his name is Roy Finch, born 1980 in Clarksburg, West Virginia. He changed it legally in 2012. 3 years after the death of his first wife, Barrett did not move. Her name was Gloria Finch, Dina continued. They were married for 3 years. In August 2011, she went hiking alone on a trail in upstate New York on a Saturday morning. She did not come back. The fall was ruled accidental. There was an investigation, thorough enough to close. Not thorough enough to find anything. She paused. She had a life insurance policy, $2.9 million. Roy Finch was the sole beneficiary. The parking lot outside was very still. The woman with the groceries was gone. The delivery man had moved on. The white van was still idling, engine running for no visible reason. In 2017, Dina said, he was in Louisville under different documentation. He became involved with a woman named Patricia Elms, restaurant owner, divorced, comfortable financially. They were together 8 months before she ended it. Another pause. 3 weeks after the breakup, she filed a restraining order. The application described a pattern of surveillance and what she called a feeling that he had been studying her life rather than living it alongside her. The order was granted. Finch left Kentucky within 6 weeks and did not return. Barrett filed that phrase away. Studying her life rather than living it alongside her. In 2020, he appeared in Raleigh under the name Warren Cross. He married a woman named Judith Sable, 51 years old, widowed. She owned a construction business her late husband had built from nothing. They were married 14 months, a beat. She died in a house fire that October. The fire marshal's investigation found no definitive cause. An accelerant was suspected but not confirmed. Roy Finch was 40 miles away at a documented public event at the time of the fire. He collected $3.8 million. The room was very quiet. 3 Barrett said that we know of, Dina said. I've been at this since 6 this morning. There may be others I haven't reached yet, Walter's voice, quiet. There's more. Barrett already knew. He could hear the shape of what hadn't been said yet. The notary in Westerfield, Dina said. The one who witnessed your signature on the insurance adjustment. I found him. Walter said he moved to Idaho. He did, but he had a prior professional relationship with Roy Finch under his Preston Aldrich name, a real estate transaction 2 years ago in Connecticut. That gave me the thread. A brief pause. He didn't disappear because he was afraid. He was paid. He's currently living outside Boise under a third name. He doesn't know I've found him yet. Barrett set the phone against his knee for a moment and looked at the wall. The notary had handled a real estate transaction for Finch 2 years ago. Then 16 months ago had witnessed a falsified signature on an insurance document, then retired and relocated, a man who had made himself useful and then made himself scarce. One more thing, Dina said to Celeste. I found a message thread on a secondary email account registered to her, encrypted but not well. In an exchange from 14 months ago, she asked him directly whether he had ever been in legal trouble. He told her it was a misunderstanding from years back. Fully resolved, she accepted that. Barrett said nothing, but there's a second message, Dina continued. 40 minutes after the first, same thread, she wrote, I need to know I'm not one of many. I need this to mean something. A pause, and he wrote back, You're the one I've been waiting for. After this, everything is ours. The sailboat above the desk did not move. Barrett stared at it. You're the one I've been waiting for. He thought about Gloria Finch on a trail in upstate New York. About Patricia Elms using the word studying in a restraining order application. About Judith Sable in a house in Raleigh that caught fire on a night her husband happened to be 40 miles away. Finch had said those same words, shaped differently, fitted to each wound. Because he was very good at finding the wound, at locating the specific hollow in a person and saying exactly what fit its shape. Celeste had wanted to be the exception, the singular one, different from any woman before her, and Finch had given her that because giving it cost him nothing, because he had given it before and would have given it again. She did not know about Gloria. She did not know about Judith. She had asked whether there was a past and accepted an answer that was not true and kept going. Whether she believed it fully or chose to accept it anyway, Barrett could not say. Probably she herself could not say. Does she know who he really is? Barrett asked, his real name. The real history. Dina was quiet for a moment. No, I'm confident of that. The Roy Finch records are scattered across 3 states under 2 names. They're not findable without knowing what to look for. She knows Preston Aldrich. She doesn't know the man underneath that name, Walter said, which means she's both a participant and someone who was lied to. Yes, Barrett said. Both things are true. He did not say that with softness. He did not say it with bitterness either. He said it the way you state a fact that is complicated and true regardless of how you feel about it. Both things at the same time. She had helped plan his death. She had also been chosen because Roy Finch was very good at identifying the women who would. He had found the crack in her and worked it until she was standing on a back patio in a blue dress waiting for a phone call. That did not absolve her. It also did not make her into a simple villain, which was somehow harder to sit with. Dina, Barrett said. Keep going. Everything on Finch. The full timeline, the name changes, all of it. I want it bulletproof before this is finished. Understood. I'll have a full report by morning. And the notary, I'm on a plane tomorrow. He'll cooperate. People who falsify documents become very reasonable when they understand the alternative. The call with Dina closed. Walter stayed on. A moment of quiet between 2 men who had known each other through enough to sit in silence without needing to fill it. Go back tonight, Walter said finally. She can't suspect anything has shifted, I know. The longer she believes you only noticed the driver and not anything else, the more time we have. I know, Walter. A pause. How are you holding up? Barrett considered that question with the honesty it deserved. "I'm working," he said. "That's not. I know it's not what you asked." He looked at the sailboat on the wall. "Ask me again in a week." Walter let that stand. "Call me after dinner." The call ended. Barrett stood, walked to the window again. The parking lot had emptied out. Just the white van now, still there, still idling for no reason he could determine. He watched it for a moment. Then he opened his briefcase and got to work. He arrived home at 6:45 that Monday evening. Owen drove him through the front gate the same way he had driven him through it 1,000 times before. Barrett sat in the back seat, briefcase on his lap, face arranged in the careful neutrality he had spent the afternoon practicing. Not absence of emotion, presence of the right one. A man who had dealt with an unexpected problem and resolved it, and was coming home tired. Celeste was waiting at the front door. She had changed into soft grey trousers and a cream sweater, hair down, the deliberately casual look of someone who had spent time making themselves seem like they hadn't tried. She came down the front steps when she saw the car, took both of his hands. "Thank God," she said. "I've been worried all day. I'm all right." He let her hold his hands. It turned out to be a dispatch error. Someone accessed the company's scheduling software and rerouted the assignment. Walter thinks it may be part of a pattern. It's happened to a few other executives in the area recently. He watched her face as he said it. He had spent 20 years reading faces across tables where the stakes were high. He had learned the difference between a reaction and a performance. The faint softening around her eyes was real. The small exhale she hadn't intended to show was real. Both of them were compatible with everything he now knew about her. A plan failing was not good news. But a plan failing because of a software glitch rather than because she had been found out. That was different. That was something she could work with. "That's frightening," she said. "Are you sure you're all right?" "Fine. Just rattled. Do you want me to call someone?" "Walter is handling it. The company is cooperating with the investigation." She put her arms around him. He returned it, one hand between her shoulder blades, the other at her side, the geography of 1,000 previous embraces. Her perfume was the same. He had bought the last 3 bottles himself, at the same store every December. He held her and looked over her shoulder at the front of his house and thought about Roy Finch on the back patio that morning. The way his voice on the recording had been precise and unhurried. Like a man reading from a list he had committed to memory, Barrett did not let that show. "Come inside," Celeste said. "I made pasta. The one you like." He followed her in. The dining room was lit with candles she had placed before he arrived, wine open on the sideboard. 2 places set at the corner of the long table, close together the way she had always preferred. He had liked that about her once. The refusal to sit at opposite ends. He sat down. She poured the wine, asked about the Denton meeting, whether he had managed to reach the team about rescheduling, what Walter had said about the company's liability in the dispatch situation. He answered everything, gave her enough to seem honest. Not so much it seemed constructed. She listened carefully, nodded in the right places, touched his hand once across the corner of the table, said the right things. He ate his pasta. It was good. She had always been a good cook. That remained true regardless of everything else, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. After dinner, she suggested the living room. He said yes. They sat on the sofa with the lamps turned low, and she put on something quiet on the stereo and rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and Barrett looked out through the tall windows at the dark yard below. The back patio was out there, the white iron table, the chairs. He could not see them from this angle, but he knew exactly where they were. At 9:30 she said she was tired. She kissed his cheek, said sleep well. Went upstairs. He heard her footsteps cross the landing. The bedroom door closed. He sat in the dark for exactly 5 minutes. Then he stood, walked quietly to the back hallway, took his coat from the hook by the side door, and let himself out into the night. The cold hit him cleanly. A half-moon sat low over the tree line at the far end of the property. His breath came out in small, steady clouds. He crossed the lawn toward the carriage house. The small brick building sat behind the south wing, tucked behind a hedge of boxwood. 2 windows in the front, showing a warm yellow light. He had offered it to staff when he bought the property because it was sitting empty. Sloane had been the first person to take it. She and her daughter had been there for 2 years. He had not once thought to wonder what those 2 years had looked like from inside that building. He knocked softly, a pause, footsteps. The door opened. Sloane Merritt looked at him the way a person looks when they have been waiting for news all day, and are not sure whether its arrival means safety or something worse. She stepped back without a word and let him in. The interior was small and orderly, a sofa with a blue blanket folded over one arm, a bookshelf crammed tight, organized by some system that was entirely hers, a child's drawing pinned to the wall beside the entrance to the kitchen, purple house, green sky, a figure with enormous yellow hair that Barrett assumed was Cora's interpretation of her mother. He looked at the drawing for a moment longer than he intended. Then he turned to Sloane. "Cora's asleep?" Since 8, she crossed her arms. Not defensively, the way a person does when they are cold and also bracing for what comes next. "Is everything all right?" "For now, yes." He paused. "I need to tell you some things. Not everything tonight, but enough." She looked at him steadily. "Okay." He told her the shape of it. Not Roy Finch's full history, not the complete contents of the insurance documents, but the bones. There had been a plan. It went back further than one morning. The man whose voice she had recorded was dangerous in a way that was not impulsive or careless. Methodical. The kind that took months to arrange and was designed to leave almost nothing behind. Almost. Except for a woman finishing inventory in a storage room with an old phone. She listened the way she had listened that morning. Still, focused, no interruptions. When he stopped, she said, "Is Cora safe?" "Yes." No hesitation. "There are people watching the property. You won't see them, but they're there," she repeated it quietly. "People watching the property? I know how that sounds." "No." She shook her head once. "I understand why. I just needed to hear it plainly." A pause. "She's safe. That's all I need to know right now." He looked at her, 35 years old, a daughter, a job on someone else's property. She had spent the previous night awake and frightened, and had walked out into his path that morning and changed the direction of everything with 3 words. And then she had gone back inside and worked a full day and kept her face calm and told no one. "What do you need from me?" she said. "No conditions, no negotiation. Just that, keep doing exactly what you have been," he said. Normal, steady. "If Celeste asks about today, you were in the laundry room all morning. You saw me leave. That's all you know. And after?" He thought about that. "After is different. After is better. But I need a few more days." She nodded once. He moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. "Ms. Merritt," she looked up. "I've lived in that house for 6 years. You've worked there for 2 of them." He found the words carefully. "I don't know the name of Cora's teacher. I didn't know she was in the house on weekday mornings. I don't know why you stayed up until 3 in the morning deciding whether to trust me with something that could have gotten you fired." He paused. "I should have made those things easier to know. I'm sorry I didn't." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Her teacher is Mrs. Aldgate. Cora was in the house because her school has a late start on Mondays. I stayed up because you seemed like someone worth the risk." 3 answers, delivered in the same level voice. As though they were all equally useful pieces of information, he absorbed them, all 3. He nodded, stepped out into the cold, pulled the door quietly behind him. He stood on the small stone step and let the night move through him. She had stayed up because he seemed worth the risk. He had not thought of himself in those terms in a very long time. Not as something worth a risk. He had thought about the company, the obligations, the things that would keep going or stop going depending on his decisions. Not whether he himself was worth anything to someone who didn't need something from him. He walked back across the dark lawn toward the house. Halfway, his phone buzzed. "Walter," he answered. "Dina has more," Walter said without greeting. The email thread. "There's a second exchange I didn't have when we spoke earlier." Barrett kept walking. "Tell me." After Celeste sent the second message, the one asking if she was one of many, Finch wrote back once more. The same night Walter paused. He wrote, "I've never let anyone this close before. When this is done, we disappear together. New life, everything clean." Barrett stopped on the lawn. New life, everything clean. He thought about Judith Sable in Raleigh, about the 40 miles of documented distance, about 3.8 million moving into a new name's bank account. Finch had promised Celeste a future, a shared one. On the other side of Barrett's death, a clean beginning somewhere else. There was no future. There never had been. There was only the pattern, the approach, the withdrawal, the next name in the next city. Celeste did not know she was the plan, not the partner. "Does she have any idea?" Barrett said quietly. "How this ends for her?" "No," Walter said. "I don't think she does." Barrett stood in the dark on the back lawn of his house with the cold settling into the collar of his coat and thought about what that meant. that a woman had helped arrange his death and was also walking toward her own destruction. Both things operating at the same time, neither visible to her. He did not feel pity exactly. He did not feel absolved of anything. He felt the weight of a situation that was more complicated than rage could hold. The separation agreement, he said. I need to sign it. I have the paperwork ready for tomorrow morning. Legitimate notary. My office. It removes her from the company stake entirely. Do it. There's something else, Walter said. I've been thinking about the end of this and we have enough to go to the authorities tonight. The recording, the insurance fraud, the false signature, the notary, Finch's history. We could have both of them in custody before midnight. Barrett waited, but, Walter said, but Finch has walked away before, 3 times. Each time there was enough to cause discomfort and not enough to hold him. If we move too early before he acts again, his attorney argues entrapment on the manufactured elements and reasonable doubt on the rest. He walks again, a pause. If we give him one more opportunity to move, in a situation we control. With every exit already closed, Barrett looked up at the house. The bedroom window on the 2nd floor. The light still on behind the curtain. He thought about Gloria Finch going for a hike on a Saturday morning and not coming home. He thought about Judith Sable in a house that caught fire while her husband was 40 miles away. He thought about a stretch of road past a turnoff where the guardrail was old and the water was deep and the current moved toward the north inlet. Set it up, he said. I'll need you to tell Celeste about a rescheduled Denton meeting, Friday morning, same route, same time window. I'll tell her tomorrow at dinner. Good. I'll start the rest. Barrett ended the call. He stood outside for another minute. Let the cold finish its work. Then he went inside, locked the side door behind him, hung his coat and walked through the dark house to the kitchen. He needed water. Just water. He pushed through the kitchen door. Sloane was there. She was in a thick cardigan over her work clothes, clearly not yet changed for sleep. She was holding 2 mugs, and she stopped completely when she saw him standing at the kitchen door in the dark. Neither of them moved for a second. Then she said, I couldn't sleep either. She walked to the table, set one of the mugs in front of the chair at the near end, sat down 2 seats away, not across, beside him. Both of them facing the same dark window. He looked down at the mug. Tea, honey. He could smell it from where he stood. He had not asked for it. She had not asked if he wanted it. She had simply made 2 cups because she had been awake and thinking and had known somehow that he would come back through. He pulled out the chair and sat down. He wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth moved through his palms slowly. He did not speak, neither did she. They sat in the dark kitchen at the long table with the candles from dinner long burned out and the cold pressing at the windows. After a while she said quietly, Is it going to be all right? Really? Thought about it. The way it deserved. Yes, he said. I think it is. She nodded, looked back at the dark window. Good, she said. Just that, and somehow it was enough. They sat for another 20 minutes without talking about any of it. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a branch moved against the window glass. The house settled around them the way old houses do in October when the temperature drops. Barrett drank his tea. He could not have explained why this kitchen at this hour felt more like solid ground than anything he had stood on in the past 3 years. He did not try to explain it to himself. Some things earned their meaning before you had language for them. He sat with it and let the tea go cold. Tuesday passed in the careful rhythm of performance. Barrett moved through the house the way he had always moved through it, unhurried, slightly distracted. The particular manner of a man whose attention was always partly elsewhere, on the company, on the next call, on the problem that hadn't fully resolved yet. He took calls in his study. Signed the separation agreement at Walter's office at 9 in the morning and felt something release in his chest when the pen lifted from the paper. Ate lunch alone. Came home at a reasonable hour. He kissed Celeste on the cheek in the hallway, smiled at the cook when she handed him coffee, nodded at the gardener through the study window, every small habit intact. Every detail a word in a sentence Celeste was reading. That evening over dinner he mentioned the trip. I have to go to Denton on Friday morning, he said. He refilled his glass and set the bottle down. The meeting I missed Monday. I can't put it off again. Celeste looked at him across the candles. She did not react immediately. She took a small sip of wine, set the glass down, then nodded. Of course, she said. Is the company sending a different car this time? Owen is driving. I told Walter I wanted him specifically after everything this week. That sounds wise. She smiled across the table. Better safe. Yes, Barrett said. He smiled back. 2 people at a candlelit table. Both of them eating dinner. Both of them knowing exactly what Friday meant. Only one of them knowing that the other knew. Wednesday was documentation. Dina sent her full report. Roy Finch's complete timeline. 3 confirmed women, 1 who escaped, 2 who did not. Every name change documented, every insurance policy. The notary in Westerfield confirmed through property records that he had handled 4 transactions for Finch across 2 states over 3 years. The Idaho address was confirmed. Dina's plane had landed at noon, and by 4 o'clock she had a statement. Walter forwarded everything to a contact at the federal prosecutor's office, who had agreed to observe without acting until Friday's operation produced what it was designed to produce. Thursday, Barrett ate dinner alone. Celeste had a foundation meeting in the city and would be back late, she said. He said, of course. He sat at the long table by himself with a plate of food the cook had left covered in the kitchen, and ate it without tasting it and thought about nothing in particular for almost an hour. Then he went to bed. He lay in the dark and ran the Friday sequence the way he used to run freight routes when he was young. Every variable, every branch point, every place where something could go differently than expected. He ran it until the ceiling stopped being interesting and the cold outside pressed hard against the windows, and somewhere around 3 in the morning he stopped running it and let the weight of the week settle on him. He thought about his father. His father had worked a loading dock in Harrisburg for 31 years. Same dock, same bad knee that worsened every winter and was never properly treated because the money always needed to go somewhere else first. His father had been a man who showed up. That was the whole of it. He showed up and did the work and came home and sat at the kitchen table and was present, accounted for there. Barrett had spent his adult life building things his father never could. The company, the house, the name in rooms his father would never have been invited into. He had never once considered that showing up and being present and accounted for was the harder thing. He was considering it now. He fell asleep around 4. His alarm went off at 6. He was already awake. Friday morning arrived the way the hard ones do. Clean, cold, without ceremony. Barrett dressed in the grey suit, not the charcoal. The grey which he wore to acquisitions and signings and the meetings where things were decided. Because Friday was the rescheduled Denton meeting, and Barrett Hale wore the grey suit to the meetings that mattered. Every detail a word in a sentence. He came downstairs at 7:15. Celeste was in the kitchen. She was making coffee and wearing the soft blue robe she'd had for years, hair up, the easy domesticity of a woman at home on a Friday morning. She turned when she heard him, and her face did the thing it had done all week. The managed warmth, the careful liefuk. She poured him a cup without being asked and set it on the counter. He stepped past her to pick it up, and for a moment they were standing close the way a marriage looks from a distance. Ordinary, comfortable. 2 people sharing a kitchen in the early morning. He took his coffee and sat at the small table by the window. She sat across from him, pulled the robe a little tighter. Outside the window, the yard was still and grey. The maple at the far end was shedding its last leaves. The lawn needed tending. Big day, she said, rescheduled Denton meeting. Can't miss it again? Owen driving? Yes, she nodded, wrapped both hands around her mug. They sat across from each other in the small kitchen and drank their coffee, and the silence between them held everything neither one was saying. He had married her in a small, outdoor ceremony in the Virginia Hills 11 years ago. Late afternoon light. The way she had looked at him when she said the words. He had believed everything about that moment. He still believed it had been real. Once, that was the part he hadn't expected. The grief wasn't for who she had become or the plan she had made. It was for whoever she had been in that afternoon light before she became this. He didn't know when the change had happened. Maybe there was no single moment. Maybe it had been a slow accumulation of small decisions, each one smaller than a turning point but adding up to one anyway. He would probably never know. He finished his coffee, stood up, put his cup in the sink. I should get ready, he said. Barrett, he turned. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes, something that was either genuine or the most convincing imitation of it he had ever seen. Be careful today, she said. He held her gaze. I always am, he said. He went upstairs. Finished getting ready, came back down at 7:50. Briefcase, coat over his arm, phone in his jacket pocket. He passed through the kitchen on the way out. Sloane was there. She had arrived at 7:30 as always, moving through the morning routine with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. The counter was clean, the dishwasher running, a child's breakfast plate drying on the rack by the sink, which meant Cora had already eaten and gone back to her room. Normal. Exactly as it needed to look. Barrett walked to the counter and poured the last of the coffee into his travel mug. An ordinary thing. A man getting his coffee before work. Sloane moved to the far counter and began wiping it down with her back to him. He picked up the travel mug. "How is she this morning?" he said quietly. Sloane did not turn. "Good, she's drawing. She wants to show you what she's working on when you get back." He absorbed that. "When you get back, not if," he said even quieter. "I'll be back." Sloane turned then. Just slightly, just enough that he caught the line of her jaw, the steadiness in it. The thing she wasn't putting into words, because they both understood that the words available were not large enough for what was actually being said. "I know," she said, 1 second to 2. Then he walked out, through the hall, out the front door, down the steps, onto the path. The morning was cold and clean, sky the color of pale slate, the kind of October morning that was beautiful in a way that asked nothing of you. Just presence. Just attention. At the gate, Owen stood beside the black sedan in his dark jacket and his cap. Left thumb resting on the door handle, the silver ring catching the early light. Barrett felt something loosen in his chest. Something he had not known was tight until it wasn't. He walked to the car at his normal pace, not looking at his phone for once. Looking at Owen, Owen gave him the smallest nod. The kind that meant "I see you," the kind that meant "I've got you." Barrett got in, Owen closed the door, got in the front. The gate opened and they pulled out into the street. For 5 minutes they drove without speaking. The city moved past them at the pace of an ordinary Friday morning. A school bus, a man unlocking a hardware store, a bakery with the lights just coming on behind the glass. Then Owen said quietly, "They picked us up at the Whitmore intersection." "How many?" "2 vehicles. Dark blue SUV and a grey sedan." SUV is 3 cars back. "Sedan took a parallel street and will merge on Route 9. Dina's team confirmed. Texted me at 7:42. They've been on Finch since 6 this morning." Owen's eyes moved to the rear view and back to the road. He changed the approach. Barrett felt it. That stillness that comes before something shifts. "Tell me." Original plan was a single driver. 1 point of contact at the lake. He's running 2 vehicles now, 1 behind to confirm. 1 already positioned ahead of us on Route 9, front and behind. A box moving down a highway toward a stretch of road with an old guardrail and deep water. "Walter knows?" Barrett said, called him at 7:45. He added a 3rd vehicle on the north approach. The federal contact moved to a closer position. Owen checked the mirror once more. "We have more coverage than they do." Barrett nodded. He looked out the side window at the city giving way to the outskirts. Low hills, second-growth timber. Old farmhouses set back from the road. He had driven this route dozens of times to Denton. To meetings. To a weekend place he'd shared with a college friend for 3 years before the friend moved west. He had never driven it thinking about a guardrail. He did now. And he let himself think about it fully. The way you look at something hard directly instead of just past it. Because that was the only way through, Owen said. Coming up on Route 9, Barrett sat forward slightly. The highway narrowed. Trees pressed closer. The sky had dropped lower the way it did when weather was deciding whether to move in. Sedan merged from the left, Owen said. Running 2 cars ahead now. They've got us bracketed. In the side mirror, the dark blue SUV was still 3 back. Steady. Patient. A box closing around them on a road that had been chosen because of what was waiting at the end of it. Barrett looked straight ahead. He thought about Gloria Finch on a Saturday morning. About Patricia Elms writing the word studying in a legal document. About Judith Sable in a house that burned. He let himself feel the full weight of all 3 of them. He owed them that. The witnesses who weren't there, who couldn't be there. Who were the reason this had to be done right. Keller Lake turnoff, Owen said. Half a mile, Barrett looked out the window. The reservoir appeared on the left. He had seen it before without seeing it. A long, flat stretch of dark water, pressed between the low bank and the road, with a guardrail along the shoulder that was older than it looked, and leaned slightly inward at one support post where the base had rusted through. He looked at it once. Then he looked away. There, Owen said, at the turnout ahead. A dark car on the gravel apron. A man leaning against the driver's door with his face turned away. Same height, same dark jacket, the driver from Monday morning, same man, different day. Keep your speed, Barrett said. Owen kept his speed. They passed the turnout. In the side mirror, Barrett watched the man straighten, reach for the door handle. The engine starting. Behind them, the blue SUV was closing the gap. Ahead, the grey sedan slowed slightly, narrowing the space between them. Now, Barrett said. Owen pressed the button on the dashboard. Everything happened in under a minute. Two black SUVs that had been parked in a fire road cutout a quarter-mile ahead pulled out simultaneously and blocked both lanes. Hard, no warning, no ceremony. The grey sedan braked and went sideways onto the gravel shoulder. The blue SUV behind them accelerated forward and closed in from the rear. From a side road off the turnout, a third unmarked vehicle appeared and sealed the gravel apron where the second car had been waiting. The man from the turnout hit the gas and found nowhere to go. Owen pulled the sedan onto the right shoulder and stopped 45 seconds. Start to finish, no sirens yet. Just the sound of brakes and gravel and car doors opening with the calm efficiency of people executing something they had prepared for. Plainclothes officers approached both blocked vehicles from the front SUVs. The grey sedan's driver got out with his hands up before he was asked. The man from the turnout sat in his car for 11 seconds. Barrett counted them. Then the door opened slowly and he stepped out with his hands visible and nothing to say. Two county vehicles arrived from the south. The operations was proceeding through every proper channel, documented, witnessed, above question. Owen turned in his seat. His eyes found Barrett's in the rear view first. Then he turned all the way around. Done, sir? Barrett watched through the glass. The man from the turnout was being walked to a county vehicle, hands behind his back, moving without resistance. Almost, Barrett said. He took out his phone and called Walter. Walter answered before the first ring finished. Cars on the road are contained. County is processing. Dina's team confirmed the second vehicle was linked to Finch through a rental agreement under one of his documented aliases. And Finch, that's what I was about to tell you. Walter's voice was steady in the way of someone who has made sure of something before saying it. While you were on Route 9, Finch made a call from your property. He had been on the service road behind the south wing since 6:30 this morning, waiting for confirmation that the approach was proceeding. When your car pulled away on schedule, he believed the plan was moving forward. He called to confirm the next step. Barrett's hand tightened on the phone. The call was intercepted, Walter said. Detective Harding moved on him at 9:07. He was apprehended in the driveway. Sloan, Barrett said, she's fine. Cora is fine. Neither of them encountered him. Dina had a team member stationed at the carriage house from 6 a.m. A pause. They're safe. I made certain of that before I made any other call, Barrett breathed out. Long, slow. All the way down to the bottom of it. Celeste, he said. Detective Harding moved on the main house at 9:15. She was in the living room. She had her phone in her hand when they came in. Walter paused. She looked at it and she put it down without making a call. Then she looked at them. What did she say? Walter was quiet for a moment. She said, he told me he had never done this before. He told me I was the only one. Another pause. She said it twice. Then she stood up and put her hands behind her back without being asked. Barrett sat very still on the shoulder of Route 9 with the reservoir out his window and the pale October sky above it. He told me I was the only one. He thought about all the women Roy Finch had said those words to, each time shaped differently, each time aimed at exactly the right wound, each time meaning nothing at all, and Celeste standing in her living room saying them back, as though saying them aloud might finally make them true, as though the thing she had most wanted to believe could be real if she just said it one more time to the right person. He did not feel triumph. He did not feel the clean relief he had expected. He felt the long, quiet sadness of watching a consequence reach its end. The sadness of a situation that had been too complicated for any single feeling to cover. Walter, he said. Yes, Gloria Finch's family, Judith Sable's family. They need to hear this today, before it's in any report, before the news picks it up. First call after this one. Already on my list, and the federal prosecutor, he's already been briefed. He'll be in contact with Walter's office by noon. Barrett looked out at the reservoir one last time. The water was flat and dark and very still in the morning light. He looked at it and thought of nothing except that he was here. Accounted for. Still on the right side of everything, Owen, he said. "Sir, take me home." Owen started the car. They pulled off the shoulder and turned back south. And the road behind them was empty, and the road ahead was clear, and the pale October sky held everything in place as they drove back towards the city where Barrett Hale's ordinary life was waiting to begin being something different. He arrived home at 10:15. Owen drove through the front gates slowly. The driveway was different now. 2 county vehicles parked near the front steps, a plainclothes officer standing by the door. Another positioned at the corner of the house, hands at his sides, watching the yard with the patient attention of someone assigned to stay visible. The quiet, controlled aftermath of something that had happened and been handled. Barrett got out of the car. Detective Willa Harding was waiting on the front walk. She was in her 50s, short gray hair, the kind of face that had looked at enough difficult things to stop being surprised by them without stopping to care about them. She had been coordinating with Walter since Tuesday, and Barrett had spoken to her once by phone on Wednesday evening. She was precise. She did not decorate her sentences. She didn't resist, Harding said as Barrett reached her. Cooperative from the moment we came through the door. She waived her right to silence initially. She wanted to say something. What did she say? "Same thing Walter told you on the phone." Harding looked at him directly. "She said it to me directly. In this house before her attorney was present. He told me he had never done this before. He told me I was the only one." A pause. "She said it the way people say something they've been repeating to themselves for a long time, not rehearsing it for us. Saying it because she needed to hear whether it still held up when said out loud to someone who knew the truth. Did it?" Barrett asked. "No," Harding said. "She could see that it didn't. That's when she stood up and put her hands back." Barrett nodded slowly. "Finch is in county custody," Harding continued. "He declined to speak without counsel. That's consistent with his behavior in the prior investigations. His attorney will arrive this afternoon." She pulled a small notepad from her jacket, not to read from, just to hold. "We'll need a formal statement from you within 48 hours. Walter has already scheduled it for Sunday morning at his office. Nothing today, understood? The recording made by Ms. Merritt has been formally entered as evidence. It will almost certainly be central to the prosecution." She paused. "She'll need her own legal representation before she gives any formal statement as a witness. I'd recommend sooner rather than later." "Walter is already arranging it," Barrett said. "She'll have someone by end of day." Harding studied him for a moment with the neutral assessment of someone who had learned not to confuse composure with absence of feeling. "Mr. Hale," she said, "for what it's worth. The operation this morning was clean, every step documented, every protocol followed. Finch's attorney will look for any angle and he won't find one." "Thank you," Barrett said. She extended her hand. He shook it, the hand of a person who had spent a career in the geography between terrible things and justice, where the terrain was never clean but occasionally came out right. She walked back to her vehicle. Barrett stood on the front walk after she was gone. The house in front of him was the same house it had always been. Same stone facade. Same ivy creeping along the east wall that he kept meaning to have trimmed. Same front steps he had walked up and down thousands of times without thinking about what it meant to arrive at them at all. He had lived here for 6 years. He stood on the walk and understood, quietly and without drama, that he did not want to stay, not because of what had happened in it, not out of revulsion or anger, simply because the house had been sized for a life he had already stopped living before this week. A life with 2 people in it that had become one person rattling around in rooms that echoed. He had been ignoring that for 3 years, and this week had made ignoring things significantly harder. Owen came to stand beside him. He said nothing. Just stood there in the way Owen had always stood when Barrett needed a moment that wasn't filled. After a while, Barrett said thank you. For this week, Owen looked at the house. 12 years, I know. I'm not going anywhere. I know that too. Owen nodded once, walked back to the car and began doing what he always did after a long morning, checking the mirrors, wiping down the dash, restoring order to his domain in the small, precise ways that were his alone. Barrett turned and walked around the side of the house, not through the front door, around the side, past the low hedge, across the corner of the backyard to the carriage house. He knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Sloane had been close to it, probably had heard the cars in the driveway from the moment they pulled in. probably had been standing in the small front room for the last hour trying to piece together what was happening from the sounds that reached her without being able to see any of it. She looked at his face first. Directly, the way she always looked at things. Reading it the way she had read everything this week, without flinching, without looking for the version that was easier. He said, "It's over," she breathed out, once, sharp and short and controlled. The breath of someone who has been holding something for 4 days and has finally completely put it down. "Finch is in custody," he said. "The men on the road are in custody. The driver from Monday is in custody." He paused. "You and Cora were safe the entire time. I need you to know that." "There was someone at this door from 6 o'clock this morning." She nodded. Her jaw was set. She was not going to come apart in front of him, and he already understood that about her. She felt things fully and privately, and showed you what came after, not the process of arriving there. "Come in," she said. He came in. Cora was on the floor of the living room with a large sheet of paper and a collection of markers arranged around her in a rough circle. She was 8 years old, dark blonde hair in 2 braids that had been neat this morning and were now somewhat less so. She had her mother's jaw and her mother's brow, which Barrett was noticing now in a way he had not had occasion to notice before. She looked up when he came through the door. "Are you Mr. Hale?" "I am," he said. "My mom said you were coming back." She held up the paper without standing, the natural confidence of a child presenting work they are pleased with. "I made this for you. This morning while I was waiting," he crossed to her and took the paper carefully. She had drawn a house, yellow windows, which she had filled in with attention and some patience. A large tree in the front yard that was more or less oval in shape. 2 figures standing on the front steps, sized the way figures get sized when a child is still working out the geometry of people. One taller, one shorter. She had taken her time with it. That was visible in the coloring, in the way she had stayed inside the lines on the windows. "Thank you," he said. He meant it without qualification. "You can keep it," Cora said, already turning back to her markers. "I'll make another one. I'm making a series." Barrett looked down at the drawing. 2 figures on the steps of a house with yellow windows. He did not know with certainty who they were supposed to be. He had a feeling. He looked up at Sloane, who was watching him from across the room with an expression that was working fairly hard to be nothing in particular and was not entirely succeeding. He said, "Walter is calling you today. You need your own attorney before you give any formal statement. He'll arrange someone, no cost to you, fully independent. You don't have to. I know I don't have to." He held her gaze. "I want to. There's a difference." She looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said. A beat of quiet settled between them. The refrigerator hummed in the small kitchen. Cora selected a new marker and uncapped it with concentration. He looked around the carriage house, the bookshelf, the drawing on the wall. The markers spread across the floor in their radius around Cora's crossed legs. He had lived 45 years. Built a company from a borrowed truck and a route no one else wanted. Sat in rooms most people never got invited into. He was standing in a small brick building with a stuck back door and a galley kitchen holding a child's drawing of a house with yellow windows. It was the most at home he had felt in years. He did not say that. The time for that kind of thing was not now, and he knew it. He said, "I'll let you get on with your morning." She nodded. "Thank you for keeping us safe." He stopped at the door. "I meant what I said the other night," he said without turning around. "I owe you things. The first is actually knowing who you are. I've started on that." A silence behind him. Then quietly, "You have time to figure it out." He turned. She was standing in the middle of the small room, arms crossed against the cold coming through the open door, chin level. The contained steadiness of someone who felt more than they showed and had long since stopped apologizing for either. "Yes," he said. "I do." He walked out, across the yard, into the house, up the stairs. He changed out of the gray suit, hung it carefully, stood at the window of the room he had slept alone in for 3 years and looked out at the yard below. The county vehicles were gone now. The driveway was empty. A bird cut through the oak at the far corner of the lawn. A squirrel crossed the stone path in 3 short bursts and vanished into the hedge. The maple at the back was losing its last leaves in no particular hurry. The house was quiet, completely, genuinely quiet. For the first time all week without the quiet meaning something was being arranged inside it. He picked up his phone and called Walter. "How are you?" Walter asked. Barrett looked out the window. "I want to put the house on the market," he said. A pause. All right, something smaller, better light. Somewhere that doesn't echo when I come home. I'll make some calls, and the separation agreement. Now that that's you executed, I want to set up an education trust. Unnamed beneficiary for now. I'll tell you who when the time is right. A shorter pause. The kind Walter made when he understood something without needing it explained. Understood. I'll have the structure ready by end of next week. He ended the call. He looked at the drawing in his hand. He had carried it upstairs without realizing. The yellow windows, the wonky tree, the two figures on the steps. He set it on the windowsill where the light came through. It looked right there. He stood looking at it for a long time. The case moved faster than any of them had expected. Roy Finch, whose legal name had been altered twice in 14 years, was charged federally within 48 hours of his arrest. Conspiracy, attempted murder, insurance fraud across 3 jurisdictions, identity fraud, falsification of legal documents. The charges were filed in sequence, each one closing a door that his prior escapes had relied on being open. The cases in New York and Raleigh were reopened within the first month. Gloria Finch's family in Buffalo was contacted on the Friday afternoon of the arrest, before anything appeared in any news report. Judith Sable's sister in Raleigh was called the same day. Walter handled both calls himself. He told Barrett afterward that both families had said the same thing in different words, that they had always known, that knowing and being believed were not the same thing, and they had waited years for the second one. Barrett sat with that for a long time. The driver from Monday morning made a deal within 2 weeks. His testimony named every participant, every step of the arrangement, every communication. The recording from Sloane's cracked old phone became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, the piece that everything else locked around. Dina Farlow's report on Finch's history was entered into federal evidence and used to support charges in all 3 jurisdictions simultaneously. The notary in Idaho, confronted by Dina with a complete record of his participation, had cooperated fully within 24 hours of her arrival. His statement confirmed the falsification of Barrett's signature and detailed the payments he had received and the instructions he had been given about when to disappear. Finch's attorney filed 3 motions in the first month. All 3 were denied. Celeste entered a plea agreement in November, conspiracy and fraud. She did not contest the charges. At the hearing, she asked to address the record and the judge allowed it. She spoke for 4 minutes in a voice that was quieter than Barrett had ever heard from her. She said she understood that being deceived about the extent of what she had agreed to did not absolve her of having agreed. She said she was sorry in a way that sounded like someone who had spent weeks finding out what that word actually required of them. Barrett was not in the courtroom. He had attended the first hearing in October. He had stood in the back and watched, and that had been enough. He had seen what he needed to see, which was not a verdict or a sentence, but simply the fact of the process. The machinery of consequence doing what it was built to do. He did not need to watch it twice. She received a suspended sentence with 3 years of supervised probation and mandatory participation in a victim impact program. Her attorney released a brief statement. Barrett's attorney released nothing. He sold the house in January. It sold in 11 days to a buyer who saw the square footage and the location and made an offer above asking without seeing the inside. Barrett signed the papers in Walter's office on a Tuesday morning and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for longer than this week. Longer than the divorce. Longer maybe than he had been honest with himself about. He moved into a smaller place on the other side of the city. A converted property on a quiet street with a maple tree in the backyard that had been dropping leaves aggressively since the week he moved in. 2 stories. Good east light in the mornings. A kitchen that was sized for a person who actually used one. He did not mind the size. He had spent 6 years in a house that was too large for one person and had mistaken the space for substance. Owen stayed. Barrett had formalized his position properly, given him the title and the compensation that the role had always deserved. And Owen had pushed back on the amount for approximately 15 minutes before accepting it with the dignified resignation of a man who knew he had lost the argument before it started. The Denton acquisition closed in January. The handshake Barrett had almost not been alive to give. He remembered sitting in the conference room at the final signing and feeling the particular satisfaction of a thing finished that had taken a long time to finish, and underneath it, quieter, the awareness of being present at all. of being the man sitting at that table with the pen in his hand, because a woman had stepped out of a side gate on a Monday morning in October and said 3 words. He thought about how to say thank you for that, and found, month after month, that nothing he could think of was the right size for it. Spring arrived, the way spring does in the Northeast, without announcement. One morning the light came through the kitchen window at a different angle, and the maple in the backyard had gone from bare to the first faint green of new growth, and the cold that had been pressing at the windows since October finally stepped back. Barrett noticed it. He had been noticing things more this year. Small things. The way the light moved through a room at different hours. The sound the coffee maker made in the first 30 seconds, which was different from the sound it made after. The fact that the maple had a particular branch that the wind caught differently from the others, so that when everything else was still, that one branch would be moving. He had not noticed things like this in a long time. He was not sure when he had stopped, only that this year he had started again. In April he called Sloane into his office. She and Cora had stayed in the carriage house. The new owners of the property had kept the existing staff arrangements without adjustment, which Barrett had confirmed before the sale was finalized. He had not told Sloane that he had made it a condition. He had simply made it a condition. She sat across from him at the small conference table in his downtown office and looked at him with the same directness she brought to everything. He explained the position. Operations manager for the new Eastern Division, a role he had been looking to fill for 8 months with the right person, and had kept not being able to fill because the candidates who had the organizational intelligence lacked the practical instincts, and the candidates with the practical instincts couldn't hold the larger picture. He explained the salary, the reporting structure, the scope of the role and the growth path attached to it. She asked him 3 questions about the operational structure. Specific, well-considered questions that told him she had been thinking about problems like this for a while, and had her own ideas about how they ought to be approached. He answered all 3. And then he stopped talking and waited. She was quiet for a moment. "Is this because of what happened in October?" she said. "No," he said. "It's because you're the right person for the job. October is why I looked at you properly. It's not why I'm offering you this." She held his gaze. Then she said yes. She started the following Monday. By the end of the first week, she had produced a structural analysis of the Eastern Division's logistics gaps that his previous operations director had been unable to articulate in 8 months of trying. By the end of the second week, she had identified 3 redundancies in the routing system that were costing the division money in a way that was invisible until someone sat down and actually looked. Barrett read both documents and felt the particular satisfaction of having been completely right about a person. He did not tell her he had expected this. He simply approved the analysis and implemented the recommendations and left a note on the document that said, "Good, keep going." She left a note back that said, "Already am." He kept that note. Cora's school situation was handled through the education trust Walter had established in November. The trust covered tuition at a school 3 blocks from the carriage house with a strong arts program, which Cora had opinions about and expressed them clearly to her mother, who had relayed them to Barrett without commentary. He had incorporated her preferences into the selection without mentioning that he had done so. He told Walter the beneficiary designation when he was ready. Walter had simply written it down and said nothing else, which was one of the many things Barrett had always valued about him. On a Saturday morning in May, Barrett was in the backyard of the new house. He had been attempting to clear the overgrown section of border hedge along the south fence, which the previous owner had allowed to expand into something that was less hedge and more territory. He had been at it for 40 minutes and had made progress of a kind that could charitably be described as partial. He heard the knock at the side gate. He pulled off his work gloves and went to open it. Sloane was standing there, jeans and a faded green jacket, hair down which he had not seen before. It changed the way her face sat, softer, or maybe just different. He filed the observation without examining it. Cora was beside her holding a covered plate with the careful 2-handed grip of someone transporting something important. "We made muffins," Cora said. "Blueberry. We used the good ones, not the frozen kind." "There's a difference." Bat looked from Cora to Sloane. Sloane's expression was doing the thing it sometimes did at the office when she had made a decision and was not going to explain her reasoning, but was also not going to pretend she hadn't made one. "We were in the neighborhood," she said. "You live in the neighborhood," he said. "That's what I said." He held the gate open wider. "Come in." They came in. He made coffee. Cora examined the yard with the focused assessment of an 8-year-old, establishing the relevant facts of a new environment. She identified the maple tree as the most significant feature, walked around its base once, and looked up through the branches with the expression of someone running calculations. "Can I climb it?" she said. After muffins, Barrett said she accepted this as a fair negotiation and sat down on the back step with her plate. They ate on the back steps in the May morning, the maple throwing its first real shade across the yard, a neighbor's dog working through something 2 houses over, the particular Saturday quiet of a street that was awake but not yet in a hurry. Cora finished her muffin and returned to the maple tree immediately. She stood at the base of it and placed one hand on the bark and looked up again. Barrett and Sloane sat on the step with their coffee. He said, "How's the Eastern Division?" She looked at him sideways. "You see me every day. I'm asking anyway." She looked out at the yard. The routing redundancies were bigger than the first analysis showed. "I think there are 2 more that didn't surface in the initial pass. I want another week before I put anything in writing. Take what you need." She nodded, drank her coffee. A comfortable silence settled, the kind that didn't require management. Then he said, "I've been thinking about something." "Okay," she said. "This year?" He held the coffee cup in both hands and looked at the maple, where Cora was now attempting to determine whether the lowest branch was within reach if she stood on her toes. "I've been paying attention to things I stopped paying attention to a long time ago. Small things. The way a room changes in the morning. What people are actually saying when they say something." He paused. "I don't know exactly when I stopped doing that. I know I stopped." Sloane was quiet. "I used to think the work was the thing," he said. "The company, the routes, the number of trucks on the road. I thought if I kept building, the rest would fill in around it. Did it?" "No," he said. "It didn't. I just got very good at not noticing." She turned her head and looked at him. "What changed?" she said. He looked at her. "A woman stepped out of a side gate," he said, "and said 3 words, and I stopped." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back out at the yard where Cora had found a stick and was using it to measure the distance between her and the lowest branch with scientific seriousness. "She's going to get up there eventually," Sloane said. "I know," Barrett said. "The branch is lower than it looks. She'll figure that out." "Yes," he said. "She will." Another silence. Longer this time. The dog 2 houses over had gone quiet. The street was completely still. Barrett set his coffee cup down on the step beside him. "Sloane," he said. She looked at him. "I know the timing of all of this is not exactly straightforward," he said. "I know there are 100 reasons to be careful about what I'm about to say, Barrett. I'm trying to. I know what you're trying to say." A pause. "And," he said. She looked out at the yard one more time, at Cora, who had put down the stick and was now examining the bark of the maple with her nose approximately 2 inches from the trunk. Then she looked back at him. "Ask me something real," she said, "not a preamble. Just the actual question." He thought about it for exactly 1 second. "Have dinner with me," he said. "Not here, not the office, somewhere with a proper table and enough time to use it." She looked at him, not hesitating, deciding. There was a difference and he had learned to see it. "Friday," she said. "Friday," he said. She stood up, brushed off her jeans, called to Cora that it was time to head back. Cora turned from the maple tree with the expression of someone interrupted mid-research. "Can I come back?" she said. "To climb it?" Barrett looked at the tree, then at Cora, then at Sloane, who was watching him with something in her expression that was not quite a smile, but was close enough to one that the distinction barely mattered. "Yes," he said. "You can always come back." Cora considered this, found it satisfactory, and came to collect her mother. Sloane put a hand briefly on Cora's shoulder as they moved toward the gate. The gate swung open. They went through. At the end of the path, Sloane turned back once, just for a moment. She looked at him the way she had looked at him on a Monday morning in October, outside a side gate, with an old phone in her hand and 3 words ready and the decision already made. Direct, clear. Without any of the distance people kept between themselves and the things they actually meant. Then she turned and walked on. Barrett stood in his yard in the May morning. The maple threw its shade across the grass in the particular dappled way of a tree that was full enough to be generous, but not so large that it blocked out everything. A blueberry muffin sat half-finished on the step beside him. From 2 houses over, the dog had gone completely quiet. He picked up the muffin. It was very good. She had not been wrong about the blueberries. He stood there and ate it and looked at his yard and thought about Friday. He thought about what it meant to build something that lasted. Not a company. Not a fleet of trucks on routes across the eastern seaboard. Not a name that made men pick up on the first ring. Something else entirely. Something that started with paying attention. With actually seeing the people in front of you instead of the version of them that was convenient. With understanding that the work of a life was not just in the things you constructed, but in the relationships you were present for. The ones you didn't let slip past you while your mind was on the next acquisition. He had been very good at building. He had been considerably less good at being present for what was already there. This year had changed that. Not because of the fear, though the fear had been real. Because of what the fear had pointed him toward. The thing he had almost walked away from without knowing it existed. A woman at a gate saying, "Don't take that car." A child with a drawing of a house with yellow windows. Tea going cold in a dark kitchen at midnight with someone sitting 2 chairs away. These were not the things he had been building toward when he started with a borrowed truck and a route nobody wanted. He had not known to build toward them. He had not known to look. He knew now. He set the rest of the muffin down. Walked back to the south fence and picked up his gloves. He had a hedge to finish, and the morning was good and the work was satisfying in a way that had nothing to do with a bottom line. He pulled on the gloves. He thought about Friday. He thought about Cora asking whether she could come back to climb the tree, and the way she had accepted yes, as though it were the most natural answer in the world, which maybe it was. Maybe yes was always the most natural answer when someone asked whether they could return to a place where they felt welcome. He had not felt that way about his own home in a long time. He was beginning to. The work would continue. The company would keep running. 400 trucks on routes he had built from nothing. 2,000 people drawing paychecks. The machinery of a thing he had made continuing to move in the way it had been designed to move. That was not going to change. But he was going to be present for the rest of it now. The parts that didn't show up on a balance sheet. The parts that required something different from the man who read every room for leverage and every face for advantage. The parts that required him to simply be there, accounted for, present. He started on the hedge. The morning moved around him, unhurried. The light coming over the fence at the angle it came on May mornings in this yard. The maple holding its ground. The street quiet with the particular peace of a Saturday that had not yet made any demands. He worked for an hour. He did not think about the insurance documents. He did not think about a road beside a reservoir or the sound of a man's voice on a recording describing the depth of water near a turnoff. He did not think about the long dinner table with candles and the weight of a performance, sustained across 3 evenings, and the strange, hollow sadness of holding someone who had decided you were worth more dead than alive. Those things had happened. They had been handled. They were behind him now in the way that hard things get behind you when you have gone through them fully instead of around them. Not absent, not forgotten, just no longer in front. What was in front was the hedge and the yard and the tree and the May light and Friday. He worked until the south fence was clear. Then he pulled off his gloves and stood back and looked at what he had done. It wasn't perfect. There were places where the cut was uneven and a section near the middle that was going to need another pass. But it was substantially better than it had been, and the line of it was now clear enough that you could see where the yard ended and the world beyond it began. He found that satisfying in a way he had not found small things satisfying in years. He went inside. He washed his hands at the kitchen sink and looked out the window at the yard and the maple and the section of fence he had cleared, and thought about how different a yard looked when you had worked in it rather than just looked at it through glass. He made a second cup of coffee. He took it to the small table by the east window where the morning light came in at the angle that made everything look the way things look when a day is starting well. He sat down. He took out his phone and sent Walter a message. 2 words, Education Trust. Ready, Walter replied in under a minute, as expected. Already drafted. Need the name. Barrett typed the name Cora Merritt. He set the phone down, picked up the coffee. Outside the window, the maple was doing what it did on May mornings, when there was just enough wind to move the new leaves without pulling them loose. A constant small motion, alive and easy and without urgency. He watched it for a while. He thought about a morning in October when he had walked down a stone path toward a black car at a gate, and a woman had stepped into his path and changed the direction of everything. He thought about what she had said when he asked her why. You seemed like someone worth the risk. He had spent the months since then trying to become, more consistently, someone who deserved that. He thought he was getting there, slowly. But getting there, he drank his coffee. He let the morning be what it was. And for the first time in longer than he could accurately name, Barrett Hale sat in his own kitchen, in his own house, on a Saturday morning in May, and did not wish he were somewhere else. He was exactly where he was, present, accounted for home.